Look, I have been around for 347 cycles, okay? I have seen stellar collapses, planetary reformations, and at one time, the Quarian ambassador accidentally declared war on his own species during a diplomatic dinner. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, prepared me for the Marcus Chen incident. My name is Krev, just Krev. No fancy titles, no ceremonial designations, just a mid-level bureaucrat in the Galactic Coalition's Human Integration Department. And yes, before you ask, that department exists because apparently humans need their own special category of weird that does not fit anywhere else in our perfectly organized galaxy. The whole thing started at the victory celebration of 247, right after we finally pushed back the Skorvath invasion from the Outer Rim. Big deal, huge party, everyone patting themselves on the back like they personally punched every Skorvath in their ugly faces. The Coalition threw this massive ceremony on the flagship Eternal Dominion because of course they did. Nothing says we value humility quite like a ship named Eternal Dominion, right? High Commander Velthry stood at the podium, all 7 feet of his crystalline magnificence gleaming under the ceremonial lights. His voice boomed through the grand hall, that self-important tone he uses when he wants everyone to remember he is in charge. Today we honor our champions. Today we celebrate our finest warriors. Today we reward those who have brought glory to the Coalition. I was standing in the back, datapad in hand, trying to look busy enough that nobody would ask me to do actual work. The hall was packed with dignitaries from 200 different species, all dressed in their most ridiculous ceremonial garments. The Vexorians wore their floating crown things that kept bumping into the ceiling. The Morphians had transformed into their formal geometries, whatever that means. Everyone was very impressed with themselves. Velthry continued his speech, building up to the grand announcement. As per our sacred traditions, our most distinguished warriors shall receive the highest honor. They may choose a companion from among our finest, a partner to share in their glory.
Oh boy.
Here we go. The reward system, because nothing says advanced civilization quite like treating people like prizes at a carnival game, right? But who was I to judge? This tradition went back thousands of years, apparently based on some ancient warrior culture that everyone just kept copying because nobody wanted to be the one to say, hey, maybe this is a little weird. The anticipation in the room was thick enough to cut with a plasma blade. Everyone knew what was coming next. And then Velthry said the name that would haunt my therapy sessions for the next 6 months. Lieutenant Marcus Chen of Earth. Ah yes, Marcus Chen, the human who apparently decided that war was too easy and needed to be spiced up with unnecessary heroism. From what I gathered, he had single-handedly held a supply route against a Skorvath battalion for 16 hours, saved 24 soldiers, and somehow managed to redirect a crashing frigate away from a civilian station. You know, casual Tuesday stuff for humans. They are like that. Absolutely no sense of self-preservation, those people. Marcus walked up to the podium looking distinctly uncomfortable in his dress uniform. He was average height for a human, maybe 5'10", with dark hair cut military short and this expression that said he would rather be literally anywhere else. He shook Velthrys's hand or claw, or whatever you call those crystalline appendages, and stood there while everyone clapped politely. Lieutenant Chen, Velthrys announced with the enthusiasm of someone unveiling a new starship. As our tradition dictates, you may select any eligible female from our coalition as your companion, a partner worthy of your valor, someone to stand beside you as a symbol of your achievement. I watched Marcus's face go through about 15 different emotions in 3 seconds. Confusion, discomfort, more confusion, a flash of panic, and then that weird human expression where they smile but their eyes are screaming for help. Class. Now, let me explain something about coalition beauty standards, because this is important. We have very specific ideas about what makes someone attractive. Symmetry. Check. Bioluminescence. Bonus points. Physical perfection according to species standard metrics. Absolutely required. The concept of inner beauty is something we nod along to in philosophy classes, but nobody actually considers when choosing a mate, so the lineup they brought out. Oh, it was impressive. Each female had been selected based on strict aesthetic criteria, genetic markers, and social standing. They were arranged by height, species, and probably alphabetically for all I know. The coalition does love its organization. There was Liana from Christos Prime who literally sparkled, not metaphorically actually sparkled, because her entire body was made of living crystal that refracted light into rainbow patterns. She had won the Miss Galactic Core pageant 3 years running. Next to her stood Ashira, a Valdorian warrior princess with silver skin that seemed to glow from within. She had personally killed a void serpent with her bare hands. Beautiful and deadly, the perfect combination according to every holovet ever made. Then came Keziah, a Morphean scientist who held 7 advanced degrees and could shift her form into any shape. She had chosen to present as what our surveys indicated was peak aesthetic appeal, which meant she looked like she had been designed by a committee of artists with unlimited budgets. There were others too, 15 in total, each one more impressive than the last. All standing there with practiced smiles, confident that they represented the absolute pinnacle of desirability in the known galaxy. The entire hall waited for Marcus to make the obvious choice. I mean, how could he not? These were not just attractive individuals. They were carefully curated symbols of perfection. This was going to be so simple. Oh, how wrong we all were. Marcus stood there on the stage staring at the lineup like someone had just asked him to defuse a bomb while blindfolded. Meanwhile, every dignitary in the hall was already placing bets on who he would pick. The Vixorian ambassador had money on Liana, obviously. Everyone loved Liana. Let me tell you more about these candidates because the coalition had really outdone themselves this time. They had assembled what they genuinely believed was an unmissable selection of partners. The cream of the crop. The best of the best. I could practically hear the self-congratulation radiating from the selection committee. Liana, as I mentioned, was pure crystalline perfection. When she moved, light danced across every surface in the room. Her voice had this musical quality that made everything sound like poetry. She spoke 7 languages fluently and had published a best-selling memoir about her life as a geological phenomenon. Yes, you read that right. She was technically a sentient rock formation, and she had still managed to be more accomplished than most carbon-based life forms. The betting pool had her as the 3-to-1 favorite. Ashira, the Valdorian warrior princess, stood at attention with military precision. Her silver skin had these intricate patterns that shifted and changed based on her mood, currently displaying confidence with just a hint of competitive pride. She had led campaigns across 4 sectors, held a seat on the Valdorian High Council, and could bench press a small shuttle. She was also classically gorgeous by about 90% of known species standards, with features that belonged on recruitment posters. Several junior officers were visibly sweating just looking at her. Keziah, the shape-shifting scientist, had chosen a form that borrowed the best features from a dozen different species. Tall, graceful, with skin that had this ethereal glow and eyes that seemed to contain entire nebulas, she had helped develop the quantum drive technology that cut travel time by 40%. Beauty and brains. The complete package. The kind of partner that made other people feel inadequate, just by existing in the same room. But wait, there was more, because apparently 15 perfect specimens were not enough. There was Nira, a Quelaxian diplomat with feathers that changed colors based on emotional resonance. She had negotiated peace treaties that saved billions of lives and looked like a sunset given physical form. Talveen, an engineer from Raxus 4, had designed half the ships in the coalition fleet. She had 6 arms, which sounds weird until you see her, and then you realize she makes it work. Elegant, brilliant, and could repair a plasma core while simultaneously solving complex equations. Show off. Mira, yes, another one with an A sound at the end because apparently that is the galactic standard for feminine names, was a decorated pilot with reflexes that tested off the charts. She had blue skin covered in bioluminescent patterns that pulsed gently, calming, very attractive, very likely to be chosen. The rest of the lineup was equally impressive. Every single one of them had been vetted, measured, and approved by the Coalition Standards Committee. They were not just beautiful, they were accomplished, intelligent, and carried themselves with the confidence of people who knew exactly how valuable they were. I watched the other aliens in the crowd whispering to each other, gesturing at various candidates. The consensus seemed to be that Marcus would pick either Liana or Ashira, with Keziah as the dark horse option. A few contrarians were pulling for Mira because of the whole pilot-warrior connection. What nobody expected, what not a single being in that entire hall could have predicted, was that Marcus Chen was not even looking at the lineup. His eyes were fixed on something else entirely, and that is when I noticed her. Off to the side of the ceremonial stage, partially hidden behind a decorative column, was a human woman who absolutely positively 100% was not supposed to be there. She was hunched over a supply crate, datapad in hand, completely oblivious to the ceremony happening 20 feet away. She wore a standard-issue uniform that looked like it had seen better days. her brown hair pulled back in a messy bun that was losing its structural integrity. She was muttering to herself, occasionally making annoyed noises at whatever she was reading on her screen. This was Rhonda Vasquez, and I only knew her name because I had to process her transfer paperwork 3 weeks earlier. Human Nutrition Officer, assigned to the Eternal Dominion's Food Services Division, thoroughly unremarkable in every measurable way, at least by coalition standards. And look, I am not trying to be mean here, but by our metrics. Rhonda did not fit any standard definition of attractive. She was what humans call plus-sized, carrying extra weight around her middle, her hips, her arms. Her face was round, with soft features that lacked the dramatic angles and symmetry we typically valued. No bioluminescence, no color-changing skin, no crystalline structure, just a regular human woman who looked tired and slightly annoyed about something involving supply inventories. She was not in the lineup. Let me repeat that for emphasis. She was not in the lineup. She was not supposed to be anywhere near the ceremony. She was doing her actual job, which apparently involved counting nutrition packs and grumbling about requisition forms that had been filed incorrect. But Marcus had locked onto her like a targeting system. I saw his expression change. The panic disappeared, replaced by something else. Something that made absolutely no sense given the context. He smiled. Not the polite, uncomfortable smile from earlier, but a genuine warm smile that reached his eye. Valthris noticed Marcus was not paying attention to the carefully arranged candidates and cleared his throat with a sound like grinding crystals. Lieutenant Chen, perhaps you would like to meet the selectees. Each one has been thoroughly vetted and approved by the Coalition Standards Committee. Marcus barely glanced at the lineup. Actually, sir, I have already made my choice. The hall went silent. You could have heard a pin drop if we used pins, which we do not because we have advanced past such primitive fastening technologies, but you get the idea. Valthris looked pleased. Excellent. Please, approach your chosen companion and announce her name for the records. And then Marcus Chen, hero of the Outer Rim, savior of the supply routes, the human we were supposed to be honoring, walked right past all 15 perfect candidates. He walked past Liana, who actually stopped sparkling for a moment in confusion. He walked past Ashira, whose skin patterns flickered with surprise. He walked past Keziah, who shifted slightly as if she had calculated this incorrectly. He walked straight up to the supply crates where Rhonda Vasquez was still completely absorbed in her inventory check and said, "Hey Rhonda." She looked up, noticed the entire hall staring at her and said, "Oh no, what did I do wrong now?" The Galactic Coalition's collective brain broke. Marcus smiled at Rhonda like they were the only two people in the room, which given the circumstances showed either tremendous confidence or complete social unawareness. "You did not do anything wrong. I just need to ask you something." Rhonda set down her datapad looking genuinely concerned. "Marcus, you are supposed to be at that ceremony thing. Why are you over here? Did they run out of food? Because I specifically told them the portion calculations were off. But nobody listens to the nutrition officer." "Rhonda," Marcus said, and his voice had this quality to it that I had never heard before. Soft, genuine, maybe a little nervous. "Would you consider being my companion for this reward thing they are doing?" I watched Rhonda's face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and then something that looked like panic. "Wait, what? Me? Marcus, have you seen the women they have standing over there? That one is literally made of light." "I know," Marcus said. "I am looking at you though." Valthris made a sound like a crystal cracking. His entire body had gone rigid, light refracting at strange angles through his structure. He managed to form words. Barely. "Lieutenant Chen, perhaps there has been a misunderstanding. The ceremony candidates are over there." He gestured with one crystalline appendage toward the 15 perfect specimens who were now looking equally confused. Marcus did not even turn around. "No misunderstanding, sir. I choose Rhonda Vasquez." That was the moment. That precise second. That is when the Galactic Coalition's understanding of human behavior completely shattered. The hall erupted into chaos. The Vixorian ambassador actually fell out of his floating chair, just dropped right onto the floor with a thud that echoed through the chamber. Ashira's skin patterns went completely haywire, cycling through colors that I am pretty sure indicated extreme confusion in Valdorian physiology. Liana stopped sparkling entirely. I did not even know she could do that. She just went completely matte, like someone had turned off her power supply. Keziah shifted rapidly between 3 different forms before settling on something that looked like a question mark. if question marks were three-dimensional and made of flesh. The other candidates stood there in various states of shock, disbelief, and what I can only describe as existential crisis. These were individuals who had never been passed over for anything in their entire lives, and a human had just walked past all of them to choose someone who was not even participating in the selection. Velthries tried to speak, failed, tried again, and managed to produce sounds that might have been words in some language, but definitely not in common Galactic. His internal light patterns were flashing in sequences that typically indicated severe system stress. I genuinely thought he might crack right there on the stage. "Lieutenant Chen," he finally managed, his voice strangled. "Are you certain? Perhaps your translation implant is malfunctioning? Perhaps you are experiencing combat-related stress. Perhaps you need medical evaluation." Marcus finally turned to look at him, and there was this edge to his voice that made it clear he was done being polite. "Hi, Commander. I am perfectly aware of what I am saying. I choose Rhonda Vasquez. Is that going to be a problem?" Rhonda grabbed his arm. "Marcus, you do not have to do this. Seriously, pick one of the sparkly ones. I am fine. I have got 17 more crates to inventory anyway." "I do not want to pick one of the sparkly ones," Marcus said, looking back at her. "I want to pick you. If you will have me, that it." And there it was. The human had made his choice. The impossible, illogical, completely inexplicable choice. I stood there in the back of the hall, my data pad forgotten in my hands, trying to process what I had just witnessed. My brain was doing computational loops, trying to find the logic, the reasoning, the explanation for this decision. There had to be something wrong with him, right? Some kind of defect? Maybe humans saw in different visual spectrums. Maybe their pheromone receptors were backwards. But looking at Marcus's face, at the way he looked at Rhonda, I saw nothing but certainty. The galaxy had just been introduced to a concept it was not prepared to handle, and I had front row seats to the confusion. The emergency council meeting was called exactly 47 minutes after the ceremony ended. I know because I was counting down the minutes until I could go home and pretend this day never happened. Instead, I got summoned to Conference Room 7, which is never a good sign. Conference Room 7 is where they discuss problems that do not have easy solutions. The room was packed. Velthris sat at the head of the table, still looking like someone had hit him with a stun weapon. Around him were representatives from the Human Integration Department, the Cultural Analysis Bureau, the Medical Research Division, and about 6 other departments whose job titles I could not even pronounce. "Explain," Velthris said, and that single word carried the weight of someone whose entire worldview had been disrupted. "Explain what happened." Dr. Fenna from Medical spoke first, her tentacles gesturing in agitated patterns. "I propose a physiological explanation. Human visual processing might be fundamentally different from what we assume. Perhaps they perceive beauty in inverted parameters. What we see is excess mass. They might interpret as desirable abundance." "That makes no sense," countered arbitrator Kess from Cultural Analysis. "His scales were doing that thing where they puffed up when he was annoyed. We have studied human meteor extensively. Their entertainment programs clearly show preference for symmetry and specific body proportions. Lieutenant Chen's choice contradicts their own documented standards. Unless," offered senior researcher Thalon, leaning forward with all 4 of his eyes focused intently, "there is a pheromone component we are missing. Some chemical signal that we cannot detect. Perhaps this Rhonda Vasquez produces a compound that specifically attracts human males despite visual appearance." I watched this circus continue for another 20 minutes. Theories flew around the room like panicked birds. Genetic anomaly, cultural rebellion, psychological defect, brain parasite, which seemed extreme but someone actually suggested it seriously. Every explanation tried to rationalize the choice, to fit it into our existing frameworks of understanding. Finally, Velthris held up one crystalline hand for silence. "We need data. Direct observation. Someone needs to study this situation and provide us with answers." His eyes, or whatever crystalline structures he used for seeing, landed directly on me. "Krev, you work in human integration. You will observe Lieutenant Chen and Officer Vasquez. Document their interactions. Find out why this happened. And that, my friends, is how I became a relationship spy. Over the next week, I followed them. Not in a creepy way. I had official authorization and everything, but it still felt deeply weird. I watched them in the mess hall and the recreation areas during their off-duty hours. I took note. I recorded data. I tried to find the logical explanation for Marcus's choice. What I found instead was baffling. They just talked, like, constantly. I watched them sit in the corner of the mess hall for 2 hours straight, just having a conversation. Rhonda was explaining something about protein synthesis and nutritional requirements for different species, and Marcus was listening like she was revealing the secrets of the universe. He asked questions. She laughed at something he said. This full-bodied laugh that made her whole face light up. There was no ceremony to it. No performance. Rhonda did not seem to be trying to impress him, and Marcus did not seem to be trying to prove anything. They just existed comfortably in each other's space. I noted this in my report. Subjects demonstrate unusual ease of communication, purpose unclear. The next day I observed them in the recreation area. They were playing some human card game and Rhonda was absolutely destroying him. She won 4 games in a row and instead of being upset, Marcus was laughing. Actually laughing like losing was somehow fun. "You are terrible at this," Rhonda said, gathering up the cards. "I know," Marcus replied, grinning. "I am counting on you underestimating me so I can win eventually. That is a terrible strategy. It is the only one I have got." She shook her head, smiling, and dealt another hand. Their fingers brushed when she passed him his cards, and I saw something in Marcus's expression soften. Just this small moment, barely noticeable, but it was there. I wrote in my report, physical contact appears minimal but significant. Emotional response detected. Still seeking rational explanation. On day 4 I found them in one of the observation decks, sitting on the floor with their backs against the wall watching the stars drift by. They were not even talking, just sitting there in comfortable silence. Rhonda had her head tilted back, eyes closed, and Marcus was looking at her instead of the view. "This is nice," she said quietly. "Yeah?" Marcus agreed. "It really is." That was it. That was the whole conversation. No grand declarations, no poetic speeches, just 2 people being content in each other's presence. I stared at my datapad, trying to figure out what category to file this under. Companionable silence, mutual appreciation of stellar phenomena, unexplained human bonding behavior. None of my observation categories fit what I was seeing, because what I was seeing was not supposed to exist according to everything the coalition understood about attraction, partnerships, and logical mate selection. I was watching something my species had apparently forgotten how to recognize, and I had absolutely no idea how to report it. Week 2 of my assignment, and I was starting to question everything I thought I knew about relationships. Not just human relationships, but all relationships. My reports to the council were becoming increasingly incoherent, filled with observations that made sense individually but formed no logical pattern when combined. I watched Rhonda handle a crisis in the mess hall when the food synthesizers malfunctioned during peak meal hours. 300 hungry personnel, multiple species with different dietary requirements, and systems that had decided to produce nothing but purple sludge regardless of input parameters. Rhonda did not panic. She organized the kitchen staff, rerouted resources, created alternative meal plans on the fly, and managed to feed everyone within an hour. The whole time she cracked jokes to keep morale up. When a junior officer started crying from stress, Rhonda stopped everything to talk her through it, calm and patient. Marcus showed up halfway through the crisis, having heard what was happening. He did not try to take over or offer unwanted advice. He just asked, "What do you need?" 6 more hands and a miracle, Rhonda replied, sweating and covered in what I hoped was just sauce. Marcus rolled up his sleeves. "Fresh out of miracles, but I have got 2 hands. Put me to work." They worked side by side for the next 3 hours. I watched Marcus follow her instructions without question, trusting her expertise completely. When it was over and everyone had been fed, Rhonda slumped against the wall, exhausted. "You are amazing," Marcus said, handing her a water container. "I am a mess," Rhonda corrected, gesturing at her stained uniform. "Those are not mutually exclusive," Marcus said, and the way he looked at her made me add another note to my increasingly useless report. Subject displays admiration for competence and character rather than aesthetic presentation. The following week I observed them during their designated recreational time. They had started this routine where they would cook actual food together, not synthesized but prepared from raw ingredients like some kind of historical reenactment. Apparently this was a human bonding activity. Rhonda was teaching Marcus how to make something called empanadas. I watched from a discreet distance as she demonstrated the folding technique, her hands working the dough with practiced efficiency. "No, like this," she said, guiding his hands. You have to seal the edges properly or all the filling leaks out during cooking. This is harder than diffusing explosives, Marcus muttered, concentrating intensely on his folding. Rhonda laughed. That same full laugh I had heard before. The Empanada has defeated the great war hero. I am putting that on your memorial plaque. Make sure you spell my name right. Oh, I am absolutely going to spell it wrong. Marcus Chan, defeated by pastry. He bumped her shoulder with his, grinning. You are the worst. And yet here you are, voluntarily spending time with me. She raised an eyebrow at him. Challenge. Weird, right? Marcus said softly. And there was that look again. That expression I was starting to recognize. Warmth. Affection, something deeper that I did not have words for in my language. I noted. Subjects engage in playful verbal sparring. Appears to strengthen bond rather than create conflict. Human courtship rituals remain confusing. During week 3 I witnessed something that fundamentally changed my understanding. A group of junior officers were in the recreation lounge, and I overheard them talking about Rhonda. The conversation was not kind. They were making comments about her weight, her appearance, questioning what Marcus saw in her. Marcus walked in halfway through this discussion. His expression went cold in a way I had only seen once before, during combat briefings. You have about 5 seconds to stop talking, he said quietly. One of the officers, a Centaurian who should have known better, laughed. Come on, Chen, you have to admit it is weird. You could have had anyone and you picked her? You are right, Marcus said, and for a moment I thought he was agreeing. I could have picked someone beautiful by your standards. Someone impressive on paper. Someone who looks good at ceremonies. He paused, and his voice got even quieter. Instead, I picked someone who makes me laugh every single day. Someone who is brilliant at her job and passionate about it. Someone who is kind to people who do not deserve it. Someone I actually want to talk to, not just look at. So yeah, I picked her. Best decision I ever made. The silence that followed was profound. If I hear any of you talking about her like that again, Marcus continued, we are going to have a very different conversation. Are we clear? They were clear. I added to my report, human mate selection prioritizes emotional compatibility and personal character traits over physical aesthetics. This contradicts coalition standards entirely, but it was more than that, and I was starting to understand it. When I watched Marcus and Rhonda together, I saw something that did not exist in most coalition relationships. They genuinely enjoyed each other. Not in a transactional way, not because they looked good together or had compatible social standings, but because being around each other made them happy. Rhonda would light up when Marcus entered a room. Not in a bioluminescent way, obviously, but her entire demeanor would shift. She would smile. This unconscious reaction to his presence. Marcus would seek her out during breaks, not because he needed anything but just to be near her. They would sit together in companionable silence, or talk about nothing important, or share observations about their day. I watched Rhonda comfort Marcus after a particularly difficult briefing about casualties from the war. She did not offer platitudes or try to fix it. She just sat with him, held his hand, and let him process his grief. Her presence was enough. I watched Marcus celebrate with Rhonda when she successfully implemented a new nutrition program that improved true health metrics by 18%. He was proud of her. Genuinely proud. Talking about her achievement to anyone who would listen. These were not interactions I could quantify in my reports. How do you measure comfort? How do you calculate the value of someone making you laugh when you are having a terrible day? How do you put a number on feeling understood? The coalition had optimized relationships like we optimized everything else. Maximum aesthetic appeal, maximum genetic compatibility, maximum social advantage. We had turned partnership into an equation, solving for the variables we could measure. But humans, these weird, illogical, emotional humans, were solving for something entirely different. They were solving for happiness. And watching Marcus and Rhonda together, I was starting to think they had figured out something the rest of the galaxy had missed. My 4th report to the council was due, and I sat staring at a blank data pad for 2 hours, trying to figure out how to explain what I had learned. How do you tell your superiors that everything they believe about relationships might be fundamentally wrong? I started typing, deleted it, started again. Finally, I just wrote what I was thinking. The human approach to partnership is not transactional. It is transformational. That sounded ridiculous. I kept it anyway. See? Here's what I had figured out. When we in the coalition choose partners, we are making deals. We exchange genetic advantages, social connections, aesthetic appeal, It is a negotiation. You bring your perfection, I bring mine, and together we create something that looks impressive to everyone watching. Our relationships are performances, carefully staged productions where everyone plays their assigned role. But Marcus and Rhonda, they were not performing for anyone. When I watched them together in private, they were exactly the same as when they were in public. There was no difference, no facade, no carefully maintained image. They were just themselves, completely and unapologetically. That should not have been revolutionary. But it was. I thought about Velthris and his partner, a stunning crystalline female who matched his social status perfectly. I had seen them at official functions standing together, looking magnificent. I had never seen them laugh together. I had never seen them have a conversation that was not about schedules or obligations. They were perfect for each other on paper, and utterly disconnected in reality. I thought about my own species, the Corvaxians, and our methodical approach to mate selection. Genetic screening, compatibility testing, personality matrices. We eliminated risk, optimized outcomes, ensured successful pairings. Our divorce rate was nearly zero, mostly because we defined success as still legally bonded rather than actually happy. Marcus had never seen Rhonda as a reward. That was the key insight that unlocked everything else. The entire ceremony was built on the premise that these women were prizes to be claimed, rewards for valor, trophies to display. But Marcus had rejected that framework entirely. He saw Rhonda as a person, a complete, complex, interesting person who he wanted to know better. Not possess, not display, not use to enhance his own status. Just be. And Rhonda, for her part, had never acted like a prize. When Marcus chose her, she did not react with gratitude or validation. She reacted with confusion because the entire concept of being selected as a reward was foreign to how she saw herself. She was not waiting to be chosen. She was busy doing her job, living her life, being a complete person independent of anyone else's attention. Their relationship was not about what they could get from each other. It was about what they could be together. I watched them one evening in the observation deck, and Rhonda was explaining something about how different species processed nutrients. Marcus was asking questions, genuinely curious, and Rhonda was animated and excited, talking with her hands, her whole body involved in the explanation. "You really love this stuff, don't you?" Marcus said, smiling. "Is that weird?" Rhonda asked, suddenly self-conscious. "No," Marcus said firmly. "It is amazing. You get so excited when you talk about it. Your whole face changes. I love watching you talk about things you care about." Rhonda blinked, processing this. "You love watching me talk about amino acid chains and metabolic processes." "I love watching you be yourself," Marcus corrected. "The topic does not matter." "Well, okay. I am also learning a lot about nutrition, which is actually pretty interesting, but mostly I just like seeing you happy." That was it. That was the thing the coalition did not understand. Marcus was not attracted to what Rhonda could do for him or how she made him look. He was attracted to who she was, the whole messy, complicated, imperfect reality of her. And that kind of attraction, that kind of connection could not be manufactured or optimized or selected by committee. It just happened. When two people saw each other clearly, accepted what they saw, and chose to stay anyway. We had been trying to engineer perfection for thousands of years. Meanwhile, humans had figured out that perfection was not the point. Connection was the point. Acceptance was the point. Choosing someone not despite their flaws but as a complete package, flaws included. That was the point. The coalition measured relationships in metrics and outcomes. Humans measured them in moments and feelings. We were optimizing for the wrong variables. And Marcus Chen, by choosing Rhonda Vasquez, had just demonstrated exactly what we had been missing. 6 months later, I submitted my final report to the council. It was 17 pages long, single-spaced, and probably gave Velthris a migraine just reading the summary. The conclusion was simple. We had been doing relationships wrong for millennia, and a human lieutenant had accidentally exposed our entire civilization's blind spot. You want to know the really funny part? Marcus and Rhonda were thriving. Like genuinely, obviously, annoyingly happy. They had moved into shared quarters, which Rhonda had immediately filled with plants and cooking equipment. Marcus had started learning to bake apparently because Rhonda mentioned she missed fresh bread. He was terrible at it, but that did not stop him from trying. I ran into them in the corridor last week. Rhonda was laughing at something on her datapad, and Marcus was carrying a bag of groceries. Real food ingredients that cost a fortune on a space station. They were just walking together, hands linked, completely comfortable. "Hey, Krev," Marcus said, nodding at me. "How is the human integration department treating you?" "Confusing as always," I replied, "'cause what else could I say?" "You two doing well?" "Really well," Rhonda said, and she squeezed Marcus's hand. "We are cooking tonight if you want to join. I am making this pasta thing and Marcus is going to attempt garlic bread again." Attempt being the key word, Marcus added with a self-deprecating grin. I declined politely, but I appreciated the offer. That was another human thing I had noticed. They included people, they built communities, they made space at their table for others, even bureaucratic aliens who had been assigned to spy on them. Meanwhile, you want to know what happened to the 15 perfect candidates from the ceremony? 13 of them were still single. Liana had briefly partnered with a Vexorian diplomat, but it ended after 3 months when they realized they had nothing to talk about besides how attractive they both were. Ashira was focused on her military career, which was going great, but she had mentioned to a colleague that she felt lonely. Keziah had gone through 4 different partners, each one perfect on paper, each one ultimately unfulfilling. The irony was so thick you could serve it at dinner. The coalition had assembled the most desirable individuals in known space, and the human had walked past all of them because he understood something we had forgotten. Partnership was not about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone real. My perspective on humans had changed completely. When I first started working in the human integration department, I thought humans were chaotic, illogical, and unnecessarily emotional. They made decisions based on feelings rather than data. They prioritized things that could not be quantified. They were messy and complicated and refused to fit into our neat categorical boxes. I was right about all of that, but I was wrong about what it meant. Humans were not chaotic, they were adaptable. They were not illogical. They were operating on a different kind of logic, one that accounted for variables we had stopped measuring. They were not unnecessarily emotional. They were appropriately emotional, treating feelings as valuable data points rather than inconvenient noise in the system. We thought we were giving humans a reward with that ceremony. We thought we were honoring them by offering them the best we had, partners selected through rigorous standards and careful evaluation. We thought we were being generous. Instead, Marcus Chen taught us a lesson we desperately needed to learn. He looked at our perfect offerings and said, "No, thank you. I will take the real person instead," and in doing so he held up a mirror to our entire civilization. We had optimized the soul right out of our relationships. We had become so focused on measurable outcomes that we forgot to measure the things that actually mattered. Happiness, comfort, connection, the feeling of being truly known by another person and accepted anyway. Valthrius never did fully recover from the incident. He still brings it up in meetings, trying to understand, trying to make it make sense within our frameworks. Last month he asked me directly, "But what does Lieutenant Chen gain from this partnership? What is the advantage?" I thought about how to answer that. I could have talked about emotional support, companionship, shared experiences. Instead I just said, "He gets to be happy, sir." Valthrius stared at me like I had spoken in a language he did not understand. Which I suppose I had. The whole situation has sparked changes across the coalition, small ones but changes nonetheless. The Cultural Analysis Bureau has started studying human relationship models. Some species are experimenting with choosing partners based on compatibility rather than metrics. There is even talk of revising the reward ceremony entirely, maybe eliminating the whole pick a person like they are a prize aspect, which should have happened about 1,000 years ago, but better late than never, right? As for me, I have been watching more human interactions, not as an assignment, but out of genuine curiosity. They have these small rituals that mean nothing individually but everything collectively. Asking how someone's day was and actually listening to the answer. Remembering what people care about. Showing up for each other, not because it is obligated but because they want to. Simple things. Things we had deemed inefficient and eliminated from our optimized lives. Things that, it turns out, make life worth living. I saw Marcus and Rhonda yesterday in the mess hall. She had made him lunch, something special because he had mentioned missing a specific food from Earth. He kissed her forehead in thanks, casual and sweet, and she smiled up at him with this expression of pure contentment. Nobody was watching them. Nobody was recording it for posterity. It was not a performance or a display. It was just two people who had chosen each other, continuing to choose each other moment by moment, day by day. The Great Galactic Coalition, with all our advanced technology and superior knowledge, had believed we were the enlightened ones. We had believed we had evolved past the messy complications of emotional attachment. We had believed we knew better. And then a human looked at our most perfect specimens and chose someone real instead. So who is the advanced species, really? The ones who optimized everything until nothing felt good anymore? Or the ones who understood that some things should not be optimized, should not be perfected, should just be experienced and treasured for the messy, complicated, beautiful disasters they are? I know which civilization I am betting on now. And if you ever wonder whether the Coalition learned anything from the Marcus Chen incident, well, let me just say this. Last week I started dating someone. She is not perfect by any measurable standard. She is awkward. She talks too much about mineral compositions, and she has this laugh that sounds like a malfunctioning engine. I find her absolutely wonderful. Thanks, Marcus. You weird, illogical, perfectly human disaster. You taught this old alien some new tricks after all.